And over to you, Simon.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't know the answer. I've thought about this a lot, and I've actually realized that my area of ignorance is even bigger than I thought it was. The more questions I ask myself, the more questions keep popping up. So this is, let's just go through it. Let me open my thing, share screen. I want that, and share, and then I want to do that. Okay, so there you go. Now this isn't actually the beginning of it. Sorry, I seem to have, this is embarrassing. Okay, that's the title page. And Terry asked me to talk about how to understand what members and supporters want. And let me just say right now that in the last 2 weeks since I've been thinking about this, I've been going around a lot of humanist groups saying, have you done any questionnaires? And people have been really helpful. And I'd really like to thank them for sending me stuff and giving me permission to talk about their results today. So these are the people who got back to me, thank you. These are the people who actually sent me stuff, and here they are concentrated. So I'll be talking about the questionnaires, the sorts of questions people ask, and how difficult it is to get meaningful answers from the responses. 2 people didn't have the results, so the response analysis will be a smaller group. Now, if you look down the right-hand side, these are the numbers who responded. Very interesting. But the numerator is not as interesting as the denominator. How big, how many questionnaires do they send out? And often they didn't know. But looking at some of the ones I do have, the response rate was between 12 and 25%. So only between 1 in 4 and 1 in 8 people sent their questionnaire back. And they're obviously a very select group. What about the people who didn't reply? Okay, so I'm going to be doing a review of the questions in particular. I'll be analyzing some of the responses, particularly where they throw some interesting light. And then if there's anybody still here and they're still awake, we'll have a discussion, possibly with breakout rooms. Okay. First thing, sort of questionnaire. Now, that is to say, what sort of questionnaire are you going to use? Gloucester did an interesting little study. They sent out their SurveyMonkey link on email, Facebook, Twitter, and Meetup. And you'll see the majority came back from the email link. So email is probably better at advertising the sort of questionnaire. Okay, the next big decision is whether you can have open questions or closed questions. Open questions, usually text, or closed questions, usually force choice selection. So these are 2 very good examples. So Dorsetshire Humanists, this was a 2016 question of their own, survey of their own members. The one on the left, it looks very busy. It looks as though it's going to be a lot of work. It isn't. It's very easy to do. You don't have to think. You just tick the boxes. It's easy to do. The one on the right, Cardiff, very interesting. The first 5 questions are factual. But after that, they want you to say, when and how did you become interested in humanism? What do you feel are the main principles and values which define humanism? Some of the ones further down are even more complicated. This requires time and effort and thinking. And people, to be honest, don't like thinking. It's effortful. If you read Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Danny Kahneman, you know all about that. And there's a lovely quote from Bertrand Russell, who said, most people would rather die than think, and many of them do. Okay. And then, of course, there are questions on specific issues, questionnaires. This is a good example. Gloucestershire did this earlier this year, and they obviously interested in, you know, whether people want virtual meetings and so on. So sometimes you might have a special purpose questionnaire. Now, some of the things they ask, there's one group of questions which is really sort of housekeeping. Venue, suitability. I mean, you can glance down them, I won't read them out. They're all fairly obvious. It's quite interesting that the Birmingham questionnaire showed their single greatest need was good parking. Now, if any of you have done a talk in Birmingham, it's the Moseley Exchange, and the parking is a nightmare. And every time I've been there, it's been raining heavily, every time. I don't know what the significance of that is, but whether it always rains or only when I'm there. So that was interesting. And in fact, the responders said they would rather drive out of town to a venue if there was good parking. So that's obviously very important to them. Yeah, they were asked what time of day they'd like it. And I was a bit surprised that in fact, 5 said they wanted to continue with regular evenings, but 9 said they wanted a mixture of daytime and evening. It'd be interesting to know why. Of course, so many of these responses, you say, well, why? Because, you know, that influences how you view the response. They asked this, and that made me think, you know, if I've got something in my diary, I'm not going to forget something, usually. But if I get a reminder the day before, it doesn't just remind me, it motivates me. I think, oh yes, there's that talk. That's interesting. Yes, I'll listen to that. It motivates me. So I think it's a good idea to send reminders out to motivate people into thinking, yes, it's a good thing, I might go to that. Okay. Personal information. Now you glance down these, gender, ethnicity, disability, you're thinking, oh, you know, that's a little bit tricky. But actually, I think if you explain why you're asking, I mean, these are protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010. So you have every right to ask them. And you can explain why, and you can obviously make it optional. So I think some of those demographic questions are important. I'll explain a bit more why they're important later. Now, I was talking to Teddy about this. I can't claim this is based on any hard statistics, but we got the impression that group members were more male than female, which since they're older, it should be more female than male. They tend to be well educated, they're older, retired, and they're white, very largely. Now, the members of Humanist UK are a bit different. They tend to be younger, there's a bigger ethnic mix, and there's more LGBT. And that's an interesting distinction. Then there's an interesting group that Teddy was talking to me about. He said that the volunteers, and you know, these are extraordinary people. They spend a lot of their time for free doing amazing amount of work. And to do that, I suspect that they have some sort of financial independence that in a way defines them, or perhaps is a requirement for them. They're retired, or they have a job that they can do part-time or take time off. So going back to personal information, I'm very interested in age. My doctorate was on statistics, so I love this sort of stuff. So this is the South Central Network, redoubtable South Central Network. These are the ages, and these are the proportions of people in that group. It's a big group, 2,000 people responded. Okay, so you'll see that the biggest group, 40% of their members, was between 66 and 75. And the decade before and after were about 20%. And you think, well, that's interesting, but that's nothing. Think about this. There aren't many 80-year-olds, but there are lots of 40-year-olds. So you have to do age-adjusted analysis. I'll keep this very simple. I've changed there, put the numbers rather than the actual percentages. And then you look at the percentage of the population in each of those times. So for the 46 to 55, that's 12% of the population. For people over 76, it's 3% of the population. So if you adjust for that, you get this ratio. So compared to the prevalence of humanism in the people around 50, the people over 66 are 6 times more common. Now, that's extraordinary difference, extraordinary, much bigger than it appears on the initial chart there. And why is that? Well, I don't know. Lots of things you can assume, like people, as they get older, get a bit more time, they say, well, I've always been interested in that, and I'll study it now. One possibility is that people who are not humanist die, leaving a greater number of humanists. Now, that sounds a bit fanciful. That's not impossible. It could be that humanism and a healthy lifestyle go with a particular personality. I don't know. If that were the case, it'd be rather fun. This is a free one for you, Teddy. We advertise humanism. become humanist and live longer. There you are. That's for free, Teddy. Now, some people ask questions about your belief identity, and they had to tick a box of all these things. And I was looking down these things, and I saw these ones at the bottom. I never heard of these, so I had to look them up. Do you know the difference between an agnostic and an apatheist? The answer is, I don't know, and I don't care. Okay, so then they ask more detailed questions about belief identity. These actually, I think, are some of the most interesting questions in all the questionnaires, and I'll come back to this at the end. When and why did you first identify as a humanist? When did you say, oh, I think I might be a humanist, or I think I've always been a humanist, which is sort of such a cliche. The next one, when and why did you decide to join a humanist group? At that time, not why are you glad you joined, but at that time. I'll give you an example. If somebody said to me, why did you train to be a doctor? I'd actually say, well, and I'd give reasons of why I'm pleased I am a doctor. I have been a doctor, very honourable reasons. But that's not the reason I became a doctor. The reason I chose to go to medical school was quite simply because I thought a white coat and stethoscope were really cool. And I had irrefutable evidence that I was going to be outnumbered 20 to 1 by nurses and physios. So that was the reason I became a doctor, okay, not the reason I decided that I'd done the right thing later on. Okay, so this is, again, for the South Central Network. And this is quite interesting. Most people join their local group in order to meet like-minded people or for talks and discussions. And that's the green and the blue bit next to it. 50%, 80% of their group. But that begs a question. What activities was the group doing back then? I mean, if all they were doing were offering meeting of like-minded people and talks and discussions and no social events, then obviously you're going to get that result, because that was the reason they joined. They wouldn't have joined if they wanted something social. See what I mean? It gets more complicated. You have to think about why people answered questions in particular ways. How did you first hear about our group? And those are some of the ways people might have done. And again, the South Central, this is actually quite interesting. 50% found their local group via Humanists UK or via local recommendations. Actually, that's quite interesting. I wonder if that applies in all areas. Okay, and then quite a few people ask questions about how you view humanism. Now, the first section, these are all open questions requiring people to think. The second one is a typical example of a tick box one. You've got to check in something ranging from everybody knows to I keep it myself. So again, those are typical examples of open questions and closed questions. Tick boxes are very good, particularly if you give them a wide range of things to tick, and particularly if you slightly duplicate it. So you have the same question asked in slightly different ways to look for consistency, make sure that you aren't just ticking at random or something like that. I'm not going to go into this in detail. Some groups were very interested to find out what other social activism you're involved with. I think I'm a member of all those. And obviously whether you want to be a humanist in action. And some people asked whether you're interested in learning more about humanism. And this is interesting. The Birmingham group, every single one of their respondents said they were interested in a course on humanism. And I'll echo what was said last night. These courses are great. They're great fun. And we've done it for 5 years now. And we have between 20 is the maximum. We usually have between sort of 12 and 18. And they all become very strong members. In fact, all our committee, I think, have been on the course at some time or another. And it's great fun. In fact, people enjoy it so much, they say, well, can we go on meeting? And that's why we started our non-fiction book club, which is a very popular endeavor. Questions about media? I don't know much about this FaceNet and interweb, but I'm sure you guys do. One interesting question was, would you prefer the open or closed Facebook? And then they said so that we could present more controversial data, material. Do you know, that's a bit odd, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. We shouldn't hide away. I think that's not a good idea. People ask questions about your attitude to religion. Okay, then do you want to help, basically? So they asked people, this was the Milton Keynes survey, and they asked these questions, you know, were you prepared to meet and greet, help with social media, come on the committee and things like that? Okay, so now this goes back to the Dorset humanist thing with all the little tick boxes, and there's a section there at the bottom, and these are their results. Okay. Now this is out of a total of about 40, and the numbers at the bottom are the numbers, not percentages. So a quarter, okay, said they were prepared to write to their MP. And you know, it's not very difficult doing that. You don't really have to get off your chair to do that. And then I thought, do I do that? Not often. I do some, but we've got a real, he's the worst sort of conservative and arrogant. And I just thought there's no point. But what I've heard today from Richie has changed my attitude. I'm going to ask him to write to the minister about everything. And apparently he has to. So I shall be a thorn in his flesh. Oh, it feels so good. Right. Now, if you look at the top end here, all of these things say helping with this, helping with that. People are keen to help. But if you look down the bottom end here, what people aren't interested in, not really interested in writing reports, writing to papers, coordinating campaigns, actually getting their hands dirty. And that is a problem, finding the people at the bottom to do things. Yeah. Sorry. So again, this is the South Central. 60% said that we're willing to support. Now this was a survey monkey, is that what it's called? And they don't, it's anonymous. So they said this, but they didn't give their email addresses. So that was a shame. And interestingly, they asked 200 people, or so they got replies from 200 people, and almost 80% skipped that question. So they didn't want to answer whether they'd help or not, which is, you know, interesting as well. This is one of the most interesting slides I'm going to show you. Again, it's the South Central. Remember, 200 people responded. If you no longer attend group events, please give your reason. Now, we really want to know this. And they gave 3 categories of answer: age and disability, cliquey groups, and time and accessibility. And about 50% obviously didn't give a reason. I didn't know what this cliquey group was. I thought that was some sort of arthritis, but I looked it up, and it's a social media slang for people who are in cliquey groups. It's not cliquey, it's cliquey. So presumably these people left because they didn't like a lot of cliquey people excluding others and so on. I think that's shocking. Fortunately, it's only a very few cases. This be very interesting to know more about these people. Particularly, look here, 150 answered that out of 200. So 3/4 of the people who responded had given up attending. This is a fantastic group to ask more questions to, and yeah, that's something they could do. Okay. Yeah, that's say 3/4 of the respondents. Now this is the bit I was asked to talk about. You know, how are we doing? Do you want us to do this? Do you want us to do that? What do you want? Sort of thing. Okay, so this is the Dorset Humanists, and they start off with just listing some of the things they've done. And they do fantastic things. And I was quite interested, actually, that they thought their monthly bulletin was really excellent. So I thought, okay, so I went and looked at it. And it is good. It's fantastic. I'm a great fan of the Dorset Humanists. They're amazing. But even more amazing than that is this, which is mainly consists of Dorset Humanists, as far as I can make out. This is the South Central newsletter, and this is October this year. It's incredibly professional, really interesting, really informative, and very funny in places. And we're going to nick some of their ideas. For example, an agony column run by Charles Darwin. You know, people write to Charles Darwin for advice, and he gives them. It's very, very funny. So that's by the by. Okay, so in the Dorset Humanists, they have this little checklist of I would like more events on. Okay, so these are, again, this is out of 40 people, and so 30 of them, or, you know, 25 and 30 wanted philosophy, ethics, and humanism and secularism talks. That's very interesting. Okay, it's that lot. And then down here, not many wanted gender issues and animal rights. Why? Now, why? Is it they've had so many talks on that that they're totally fed up with it up to here and they don't want to hear anymore? Or is it that they think gender issues and animal rights are not important, in which case they definitely need events on the subject? So, you know, it's when you get these answers, it begs so many other questions, doesn't it? The other thing that's not mentioned on here, and I don't know whether any of you guys do it, and that is talk by faith leaders. Each year, Shropshire Humanists has a faith leader come and talk to us. And I prepare the ground for them because I often get questions that from everybody to email me, and then I send them to them. So they get some preparation for the sort of questions they might be asked. And also we encourage them to bring members of their congregation with them so that, you know, we meet them and you know, have coffee and tea and stuff like that and go to the pub afterwards. It's a great occasion, very popular. Social events, you can just glance down these. They're all the fairly standard things. We do, I think, all of these apart from Sunday Assembly. And if any of you do Sunday Assembly, please put that in the chat. We'll come back and ask you later how you do it and what you do. We are very keen in our special interest groups, some of which have continued during lockdown, others have been postponed for the moment. And we're trying an experiment this year. We're having a fancy dress Zoom party in December. So everybody comes in fancy dress, and there'll be a prize for the best fancy dress, best party hat, best exotic cocktail, and there'll be jokes and fun and forfeits, and nobody has to drive home. So it should be fun. I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you know how it goes. Now, that's my wife keeps ringing me. Oh well, I've obviously done something wrong. Now, these are the actual really important questions. When you get a result, you know, 50 people say such and such, you need to know. Hello? Oh, God. Sorry. Hope it's nothing urgent. Okay. You need to know the denominator to really understand the numbers you've got. So just think in general, the biggest denominator, of course, is the general population, which we get from the census, integrated household survey, and various other very good Office of National Statistics, a mine of information. And then you've got your survey population, which is usually your email list. Okay. Now, what do we know about your email list? Well, we know that most of them don't respond to questionnaires. And we know they're probably local and interested and supportive because they're still on the emailing list. I gather the internet term for this is a lurker. So that's just about all we know about them. Now, they don't respond to questionnaires. So how are we going to find out about them? Well, it's a bit late now, but what I suggest we should do is when they go on the emailing list, and they're a captive audience, if that's the right word, then you've got their attention, you say, oh, we'll put you on the email list, but could you do me a favor? We're just doing this simple survey and just get some basic facts about them. I think that'd be really interesting. And they'd probably be flattered that you're interested in them as well. That might be a time to get their demographics. So at least you'll be able to compare that demographic with the demographic of the people who respond to questionnaires in order to interpret the result. Okay, now these are the sort of groups. You've got the meeting attenders. Now, on the whole, if people come to meetings, you're probably doing the right thing because that's why they come. I mean, that's a generalization, but it's sort of fairly true, isn't it, really? They vote with their feet. And then you've got the member group, and I suspect that it's largely the same as the meeting group. I don't know. Be interested to know what you think. Very easy to check. You've got details on the members. You've got details on who comes to meetings. Then you've got the known unknown of the emailing list. Now, you've got the meeting non-attenders, and that can be 3/4 of the people on your emailing list. I'm doing an experiment. I've emailed everybody on emailing list saying, in October, those of you who don't normally come to meetings, come to a Zoom. And I've given a link to how to work Zooms, and if you have any problem, ring me and I'll take you through and all that sort of stuff. Come to a Zoom and let's meet it. Be interested to see how you are, and, you know, that sort of thing. I'll let you know if anybody turns up. It'll be interesting to engage with people we don't normally see. The non-responders to questionnaires. Now, some of you have got 100, 150, 200 of these people. You have their email addresses. I think it'd be quite interesting to take a random sample, maybe just 10, 15 of them, email them and say, could we ring up and just ask you a few questions? You know, we're really interested in people who are on the emailing list. And then you do a semi-structured interview. It would take maybe 5, 10 minutes. So, you know, if you only did 10 or 15, it wouldn't take that long. You'd spread it out between friends. I think that'd be really interesting. And of course, it's public relations as well. They might feel more included. They might want to come to meetings. They might be able to tell you what they would like. They might want to start, if it's a long way away, a small satellite group. We're trying to start one in Oswestry. It won't be a separate group. They'll sort of be one under us, but you know, we'll go and do little sessions over there. Obviously, there may be humanists out there you don't know about. If you ask Humanists UK nicely, they'll send an email to all the people on their list in your area saying, if you didn't know, there's a Shropshire Humanist group, and this is how to get hold of them. And you should do that. You might pick up a few. And then you've got the non-religious people out there, which is a group that I guess interests us most. Now, in the future, they will find out about us through their parents and friends or their school. I mean, I look forward to the day when every school leaver knows about humanism and knows enough about it to say, actually, yes, my beliefs are humanist. And then they may say, but I don't belong to things and I don't want to join anything. But at least they'll have a name for what they believed, if that's what they believe. I'm also quite interested myself in what religious people think of humanists, but that's perhaps a separate area. So we can't, nowadays, this is how we find out about the unaffiliated non-religious, a very interesting group. And I mean, they're ripe for plucking. I mean, when you meet them, they just roll over and say, yes, I'm a humanist. It's very enjoyable. Okay. Now, I've shown you the slide earlier. Use email. I don't know much about these survey monkeys, but they seem very good. This question is, I think, very important. I think you get limited information from asking them to give text replies. People are busy. They'll write something very brief. Usually the questions are far more complex. And if you've got the time, and if some of you want to collaborate with me on a joint project in this way, we could do semi-structured interviews. Okay. I mean, I trained in psychiatry, so I'm sort of familiar, before neurology. I'm very interested in this area. And so we would talk to them on the phone and ask them a bit about themselves. Of course, people love talking about themselves. You know, I don't think we'd have trouble doing this. Okay. Now then, what do you ask about? Well, demographics is important. How are we doing? What do you want? What do you not want? And how can you help us? Those are the main questions that I guess we really want to know the answers to. The other ones are often asked. The one I'm interested in is this one. Your humanist and philosophical journey. It's an interesting idea. Religious people often, my brother, for example, wrote an account of his spiritual journey. And it was fascinating. And so I wrote one as well about, you know, anyway, it's a long story. And it is very interesting to talk to people about this and find out when and how did you first hear of humanism? That's interesting, isn't it? And then when did you first identify and why? And we need to know that because that's the turning point. That's when they roll over. And then when and why at that time did you decide to join a humanist group? Because I'll be outnumbered 20 to 1. But no, not quite. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, so I'm going to unshare my screen now. Okay. And I hope there's some food for thought there about the groups we're really interested in. We don't want to ask what people who come to our meetings want because they're probably getting it anyway. They'll say we want a bit more of this, a bit more of that. But we want to ask of other groups, and we want to ask more interesting and nuanced questions. So, Teddy, you were there. You there, Teddy? Oh, yeah, there you are. You're down there.
I am indeed.
So, I thought, give me a bit of catch my breath. I've been talking for half an hour. Gosh, I didn't mean to talk that long. Why don't we break up into groups and just mull over some of these ideas and think a little bit about what questions would you like to ask? Okay, say you had two questions. What questions, two questions would you like to ask a particular group? All right. And then we try and work out how we could do that because we've got various tools, including structured questionnaires, approaching people. So do that. And then how long do you want to give them? Should about 5 minutes, 6, 7 minutes maybe.
Yep.
Give you time
So
to get a drink as well.
if I send everybody off into your groups, there'll be 4 groups. So about 5 participants per room. I'll give you 5 minutes and then call you all back. And you should be able to join them now.